I'm excited to welcome Dan Lynn, Senior Vice President of Product at Crux, who will co-present with Chris Handy, who is a Senior Product Marketing Manager at Crux. The two will share their experiences and best practices on managing data quality when it's outside of your control. Make sure you put any questions for the speakers here in the session chat. Thank you for joining us today. Over to you, Dan and Chris.
Hello, thank you for that warm introduction. We're happy to be here at DrakeOn. This has been an amazing event so far, and we're happy to be involved. My name is Chris Handy. I am a Senior Product Marketing Manager here at Crux, and I'm here with Dan Lynn, who is our Senior Vice President of Product. Hey, Dan.
Hey, good to be here. I'm really excited to see the rest of this conference. Data reliability engineering is near and dear to my heart in many ways.
Me too. And part of that is because external data specifically is the lifeblood of great decision makers, right? We need to be able to get this stuff into the place where it makes the most sense to us, where we're able to use it. And we're looking more and more, of course, to artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms to guide those great decisions. And one thing we can probably all agree on is if you spend any length of time in data engineering and with machine learning and AI, is that they are hungry. The more data we can throw at it, the better our algorithms are going to be. And we need to solve this problem because there's a lot of data out there, but it's not necessarily all shaped the way we need it. So how can we avoid this garbage in, garbage out problem? And data quality is one of the things that's always on our mind here at Crux. And one thing that we have seen over and over again, and Dan, I'm going to ask you questions about this. Like, where are data consumers, the folks that are actually getting in here and using the data for analysis and to make great insights and decisions? What are they seeing as far as where they're spending their time and maybe where they don't need to be spending their time?
Yeah, that's a great question. Crux Informatics, we're about a 5-year-old company, just about. We got started, helping these really large data engineering organizations, primarily in financial services institutions. It's hedge funds, asset managers, banks, that kind of thing. And the quantitative analysts and the data science teams in those types of companies are exceptionally hungry, to your point. They're just relentlessly hungry for whatever data they can get their hands on. And that data originates outside of those firms. It's not just monitoring the activity inside of the company. It's pulling in all this additional context from outside of the company in order to make better decisions. Sometimes that's trading decisions or portfolio allocation decisions, but the problem is common across kind of our customer base, and even outside of financial services, we find this a lot. One of the challenges that we find, like especially in external data, right, is this whole problem of figuring out, is this data going to be useful for me at all? And it's discovering the data that it exists at all. It's finding a data set. Maybe it's from a commercial supplier. Maybe you're finding it from, you're having to web scrape public sources or something like that. And then you actually have to get entitled to that data and make sure that you have legal rights to use that for the purposes you want to use it for. That's a huge time-consuming problem, right? And often you're not even sure if that data is going to give you the value that you're hoping out of it. So there's a whole assessment and data engineering problem that happens on the front end of that before you really can kind of track that over time. So that we find that a lot. It's a huge amount of time, like a huge time suck for any of those kind of decision-making organizations to do that. Often that valuation of the data, like, am I going to get that lift, is a huge time suck on the front end. So that's one of the areas we find a lot of time with folks, but they've run into this problem across the different data sets of each one shaped differently, right? Each one might be, varying levels of normalization or denormalization, right? You might have some hierarchical data you have to reformat. There's a lot of transformation, so that standardization isn't consistent across data, right? Also, the units of measurement might be different in many cases. The data types might be different, right? There's a lot of kind of standardizing it so it fits your model, so you can compare it to the other data that you got from outside of your firm and make that usable. And especially companies that are getting started, they run into this problem of just the data ops and the kind of operations of that. So when you get up and running, you've actually procured the data and you're trying to use that. Some of these data feeds are, some of them are near real time. Others are hourly or weekly or monthly or less than that. And so the ways that those data feeds can break are myriad. There's the availability problems, the data doesn't show up. There's structural problems, like the supplier or the source of the data change the shape of the data, right? There's distribution or statistical, problems with the data. And that's where, technologies like Big Eye are really, really cool, right? It's like tracking that when it's in your warehouse, right? But finding that kind of problem of data drift over time is a huge problem, because you might not notice that in your model and you start making bad decisions downstream. And so it just kind of sums it all up that if you have inconsistent quality across sources, it gets worse and worse the more sources you add, unless you have a systematic way to kind of control all that holistically.
And all of this is not only just time consuming, but it actually, it's not all resource consuming, but it's time consuming as well. And we know that speed to insight is one of the things that our customers talk to us about most. Getting these insights faster so that we can tune our models, we can make better decisions. And this gauntlet we're asking our people to run through just to get to the point where we can get to those insights is costing us a lot of time and energy. And this goes back to these studies that we've seen over and over again, that people are just spending all of their time on that logistics and engineering problem and not nearly enough time on the data science as well. So that's not just how much time are we wasting, it's how much time can we remove from that process, from getting from point A to point B in our systems? How can we flip that script? And that's what we're really focused on here at Crux, because we need to give those data scientists and analysts great data products. And we'll talk about what that means in just a moment, to get from raw data to insights faster, which is ultimately what we're after, because costly mistakes can happen if we don't have real-time data, and we just have to get to those points. Now, really looking at setting the standard, which is one of those key elements that I thought was really interesting in the 7 principles of data reliability engineering, that getting that standard really set is what we're going to talk about right here. So what a data scientist look for in a great data product. Dan, I'm going to ask you to run through a couple of these so that we could talk about these scenarios and understand what this checklist really means and why we need it.
Yeah. And this might look familiar for folks that are familiar with the key elements of data quality. It's kind of our view on what makes a great data product for use by analytics groups, right? And what usually happens in a large enough firm or mature enough firm is you've got a lot of different analysts that want to use the same data for decision making. And what they're really looking for is to consume a product, a data product that's standardized across them and usable by all of that group of consumers, data consumers. And they don't want to go to the flea market and pick up, trashy data products. You want a great data product. You want something that meets kind of this checklist. And it all starts with, is it discoverable, right? In a large enough organization, you might not realize that the same data was already onboarded by some other group. It's just in the wrong place. You don't have a centralized catalog. So that's one of the key elements of just being aware of it. Can I figure out that this data product exists and start to test it for fit? Right? Then after that, right, you're trying to figure out, is it a relevant data product? Is it really going to help me? And is it going to help me with my analysis, give me better insights, reduce my risk, any of those sorts of things? And that's an analysis problem. Right? You kind of have to connect it to your data, do some blending and sort that out. So after that is really is it shaped in the right way? Is it usable for me? Am I able to, get the right dimensionality out of it? Do I have to do any aggregations ahead of time or any, imputing of values or interpolation or anything like that? After that, you've got just the reliability of the data, which is how quickly is it changing? Right? What can break this thing? If it's a high speed feed, if it's hourly or every minute or something like that, your latency for decision making becomes really problematic if the data doesn't reliably arrive on time, right? There's kind of the functional completeness part of that too, which is wherever you're sourcing that data in that data product, if it's coming from outside of the firm, they might change the schema on you. They might might decide, oh, we're going to compress these now, and we weren't yesterday. And whether you got the notification on that or not from the supplier is a big challenge, especially when you have lots of data products. After that, there's kind of a whole question of accuracy, right? Which is, is this actually representing the truth? Am I counting the right things? Is my understanding of the data actually what the data is telling me under that. Related to that is another part of reliability, which is the timeliness of the data, which is, am I getting this data, quickly enough from the supplier, but how old is the data inside of the delivery that I got, right? So the whole problem of timestamp management and quality is a huge pain, right? And then kind of after that is really just like, is it really going to fit my problem, right? So like, should I buy this? So that's a problem of just this procurement buying problem. But after that, you have the just overall operational reliability of it. That's where detecting data drift, understanding the statistical distributions of the data types, the columns within the data as it's flowing becomes critical for that kind of operational trust of the data.
Okay, hey, thanks for that. So when I really look at this list and just taking your experience and context here, Dan, there are a lot of companies that deliver really great products or really great sources of data that check all these boxes out of the box, and you don't have to do nearly as much. You might have to shape it for your own data warehouse or something like that. But when you think about it, the macro of all the data that's available out there in the world, particularly external data, how differently it's shaped, how many or what percentage, just off the cuff, would you say is actually check all these boxes? And how much of these are a real problem in daily use?
Yeah, I mean, in daily use, this is kind of across the board. If you're a company that can, source all your data from one supplier, for example, and that supplier's kind of applied all these and they've really kind of made great data products, and you're kind of single sourcing that from one kind of name brand data supplier, you're kind of in luck because you might get all of that. But across our customer base, and we operate, tens of thousands of data pipelines for our customers. I can't think of a single customer that's only getting from one supplier, right? They're getting it from all over the place, right? And so the problem is, one supplier might be great at 5 of these things, and another one might be great at 2 of them, but it's still your problem as the data consumer to figure out how to kind of bridge that gap and standardize the quality across all that data.
So that makes sense. So if we look at that last bullet on the previous slide, fit for purpose, we need to check all the boxes above. So this is really our big checklist. And we are accomplishing this at Crux through a couple of different ways. We're doing a lot of metadata management, making sure that we're understanding a lot about what the data is and the quality in a lot of different ways. Looking at the actual anomalies when things are far and away different than they normally are. How can we look at each one of these elements to make sure that we're giving you consistent reporting on what the quality is of the data? Of course, great partnership with Big Eye on a lot of this stuff. And this is the checklist that we really want you to think about and screenshot when you think about all of the things that go into a great data product coming from A to B. So this fits into our family of products here at Crux. We've got something called Crux Deliver, where we allow you to get all of this stuff into your system. But alongside all of that is really where a lot of this stuff is happening in Crux Verify. So this is how we are approaching this problem, and we're integrating it right into our suite of products so that anyone could look at all of this and say, oh, there's something I need to pay attention to. And it's really about that attention it's that attention problem we're looking to solve. There are so many inputs. There's so many things happening all the time. How do we know when to go in and look? Of course, you have to shape the model when you first get it and make sure that you understand how everything's going to be mapped and all the normal things that go into setting up a great data product, but then monitoring it over time. How do we know when to look? And that's really the problem we're trying to solve there. And to ultimately deliver data scientists great data products. That is the goal of what we call Crux Verify. And just to give a little bit more context into how this works, we have built out a model where we're getting all of your sources directly to you. But alongside that, Crux Verify is working in the background to understand more about this quality. Dan, could you just talk through this workflow a little bit and help us understand?
Yeah, so for kind of Crux's customer base, our primary kind of table stakes offering is Crux Deliver, and we deliver, as I mentioned, thousands of data pipelines that are operating on a daily, hourly, weekly, whatever basis that is. And each chunk of data that's coming from wherever we get that, if it's, change data capture from somewhere, if it's, fetching from a time series feed, they're usually kind of bulk analytical batches that you're getting. So you're getting a chunk of data and we're moving that through our system, right? And then we're delivering that into, whatever environment's appropriate for you. So sometimes that's cloud data warehouses like BigQuery or Azure, right? Sometimes that's, file stores for downstream kind of, munging into a data lake. So we're sticking that into like the S3s and GCSs of the world. But along the way, as we're delivering that, that's where we are monitoring kind of a lot of those key quality metrics, like the parsability of the data, the structure of the data. We're reformatting it and reshaping it as necessary for customers. We're adding our own metadata onto that to track the timeliness of that data. Like, when did we get it? What's the latest timestamp we saw in that file? All sorts of stuff like that. And then as that moves forward and gets into the client environment, we're in that kind of perfect position to actually monitor for data drift as well. And that's where like Crux Verify comes in, where we are, on a per data set basis, we're able to, use things like autometrics, right, to generate a whole bunch of metrics that are appropriate to the data types that are flowing through the system. And then also a bunch of, custom metrics as well that we can configure against that data set that, might measure, for example, we've got, customers that really want to know membership in this set, right? So is this a member of a well-defined enumeration of items, right? That's really, really useful in the kind of financial world to understand if something's like a member of a well-defined asset identifier, for example. So we're able to kind of track that along the way, and then using like Big Eye to report that and, give those results to the user in a way that's really consumable for them. So we give that to them alongside the data as well. We'll actually go deliver that into a warehouse of their own, right? Or we'll go render that for alerting and for dashboarding on top of that. It's been a great partnership to date because it allows us to, give that confidence that the data that folks are getting through Crux, is as expected. It fits into our broader portfolio here, right? Where we help folks trial out on that data. We do the in-flight quality monitoring, which is what we're talking about here. We have an entity matching service that helps kind of blend that data downstream, right? And in order to do that, we transform and enrich that along the way. Part of that is one of the ways that data breaks all the time is the schema changes upstream and it does it without you noticing. So sometimes your code doesn't know about that. Other times it breaks your code. And, Crux does track those schema changes. We automatically detect them and can help you be proactive about managing them.
Ultimately, all this is just going to help folks get that time to insights down, right? That's one of the key problems we're looking to solve is getting that speed injected. And this Verify, and of course, our partnership with Big Eye is helping us do that, helping us help people focus on the right things at the right time. And of course, we want to know what your questions are about this. We've really enjoyed talking about this and attending these great sessions. Particularly interested in some of these sessions that are coming up. So I'm excited about that. But in the meantime, if there are discussions that you'd like to have, we'd love for you to just type those directly in. And we're going to be talking about this also in the future. So if you want to go to that URL that's there, we're going to have an extended discussion and even further customized Q&A for all of this and data quality. So Dan, thank you very much for joining. And I know that we're going to be involved in answering a lot of these questions as the sessions continue. So please don't hesitate to hit us up. Thanks, Dan, for joining.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And thanks, folks. This is a fantastic conference. Happy to be here.